about now? Welcome to this January 15th Design Review Commission. May we do the roll call, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. We'll have Vice Chair Newsom,
I am here.
Commissioner Basting,
Here.
Commissioner Riley,
Here.
Commissioner Case is on a business retreat, and as you know, we are down to 4 commissioners. In any case, we have a quorum.
Terrific. So, consent calendar, is there anything that we would consider putting in the consent calendar tonight?
I have no recommendations.
Very well. On to public communications. This portion of the meeting is reserved for comment for items not on the agenda. We can't act on them, but is there any public communications? Items not on the agenda.
Seeing none.
Moving along. Public hearings and study sessions. I believe we have one tonight, right? Oh. Has anybody had any ex parte communications regarding the North Italia sign project?
No. No.
Okay. Does staff have a presentation?
Yes, thank you. Good
Okay.
evening, Design Review Commissioners. My name is Jessica Gonzalez, Senior Planner, and I will be presenting the North Italia sign application. So getting started with the project location, the site is located at 1179 Locust Street. And North Italia is a restaurant that proposes to occupy the existing single-story tenant space, which was formerly occupied by Tilly's. The site is within the larger Plaza Escuela shopping center development and zoned pedestrian retail within our downtown area. The project scope before you tonight involves installing a new wall sign for the new restaurant business. So here are some photos of the existing tenant space within the building. And just a quick overview of the required entitlements for the restaurant. They have applied for and received an AUP to serve alcohol. The project is before the DRC tonight, though, for review of a wall sign, which does require a few exceptions to the master sign program, and a sign height increase allowance from the DRC. The larger project itself does include repainting the building, adding some awnings and some railing to the front. And so since those exterior changes do fall under our minor design review classification, the exterior changes will be reviewed by staff as a staff level design review and issued once the project for design review is deemed complete. And so here is a depiction of the one wall sign that is proposed above the new restaurant entryway. The sign is approximately 48 square feet in size and proposed approximately 26 feet above grade. As you can see, the sign includes the words North in Italia. And here's some more sign details showing the 2.5-foot tall sign lettering that reads North, followed by the 14.5-inch lettering for Italia, as well as a night view of the internal illumination. And so as I noted, the project site is located within the Plaza Escuela shopping center, which has an approved master sign program. The sign program allows for 3 tenant signs at the subject site. Those 3 signs are shown on the screen in a red circle. This image was taken from the master sign program sign allowance. However, the 3 former tenant spaces were combined in 2010, which is depicted on the right side of the screen. And so as such, the applicant is seeking some deviations from the MSP criteria to allow for 1 larger sign at the new combined space, which does require DRC approval. And so the MSP for the site is pretty prescriptive. And so as proposed, the one sign requires a few deviations from the sign size, dimensions, and letter height. As really explained in the staff report, staff does support these exceptions as the space has been combined and the larger project frontage does support the larger sign. Oh, let me go back. And additionally, the sign also requires some exceptions from the sign location, design, and illumination allowed under the MSP. Again, staff supports these deviations given the modern design of the sign and internal illumination, which is consistent with other tenant spaces within the shopping center. And just lastly, the Walnut Creek sign ordinance does restrict the height of any wall sign to 25 feet in height. However, the ordinance does allow for the DRC to approve a higher sign upon making the findings of the screen. As outlined in the report, staff does feel the findings can be made as the higher sign includes good design and the sign is placed in front of the business it's proposed. And so here is a project rendering of the sign and how it ties into the overall remodel of the site. As I mentioned, although the design review will be reviewed at a staff level, we do welcome any feedback from the DRC on the design. And so with that, staff does recommend that the DRC determine the CEQA categorically exempt and approve the draft resolution granting the master sign program exceptions, sign height increase, subject to the conditions of approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions about the presentation? Okay. Is there, so no questions. I'm good.
Okay.
I mean, actually, let me ask a question. So, how does, like, in terms of the height, because it's above the height, how does it compare to the Cheesecake Factory?
I don't have the exact height of the Cheesecake Factory sign. I know I did pull those approvals, and it has similar illumination as the North Italia sign that's proposed. I just remembering being out there, I believe it's pretty similar in terms of being on the upper facade of the wall.
But it is.
Yeah.
I was just doing the same. Yeah. Yeah. So we're not really creating a precedent. This precedent has been allowed before. Yeah. And how about?
Correct.
Yeah. Like other signs go further down the line, do they have exceptions, or is this the only one? It looks like the Cheesecake Factory has one.
Yeah, so there was an amendment to the master sign program to allow the Cheesecake Factory sign, and that was done, I believe, shortly after the master sign program was put into place.
Okay.
And it was done for this portion of the site too. However, the site still hadn't been combined
Okay.
for the tenant spaces.
There's a couple other shops down there that had amendments too. I think it was the men's warehouse and also Nick the Greek, I believe.
Yeah.
I think they had one.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's the sum total of questions. Thank you. How about public comment? Do we have any public comment? No. Hearing none. Do we have any commissioner comments? No?
I
Right.
think it looks nice,
Yeah.
fresh.
Me too. I mean, I agree. I think, first of all, I'm really excited to have them come in because we certainly have enjoyed going in Southern California, go to the ones in Southern California. It's a great business. It's an interesting fact, it's the same ownership as Cheesecake Factory. Right. I learned, which is kind of interesting. But, I mean, I think if that's it, I think maybe let's just, how about we do a vote?
I move to approve the draft resolution that we have in our packet granting final master program sign exceptions.
Okay. How about a second?
I second it.
Okay. Roll call?
Commissioner Besting,
Yes.
Commissioner Riley,
Yes.
Vice Chair Newsom.
Yes.
Motion carries. Approved.
Okay, great. So that closes the public hearing. And so we're going to move on to commission considerations. And I understand we have a presentation, so let's go ahead.
There are two, actually. There's
Those two.
one item listed and put for city council priority setting, and then we're going to put in one before that, which is a quick announcement from Director Vandenbrand.
Great.
So the quick announcement actually, would come in item 6, but I'll just quickly make an announcement that, just to remind you that there is going to be a special joint meeting of the Planning Commission and the Design Review Commission on the 30th, which is a Thursday of this month, at 6 o'clock. And the intention is to just do a quick overview, a brief study session on the sign program for the city and the accompanying ordinance update. We're relaunching this effort, and so just wanted to do that as an announcement. Shall I proceed to the next item?
Let's proceed to the next item then.
Okay. So in terms of a presentation, there's not a formal presentation. Council had wanted each of the commissions to be able to provide the commissions with an opportunity for input on the council priority setting, so that on February 11th, Council is going to be having a discussion about the council priorities for the next 2 years. And currently, those priorities are diversity, equity, and inclusion, economic development and job creation, environmental sustainability and climate action, parks, facilities, and other infrastructure, and public safety and social wellness. And in your in your commission packet, there was a bit more information that was given about sort of all the things that are behind it. So, for example, the parks, facilities, and other infrastructure, the effort to essentially to rebuild and to construct a new Heather Park Aquatic Center and Community Center is on there. And then under economic development and job creation, permit streamlining, and a number of the activities that this commission actually sees is on there. So the way that has gone with other commissions is that there hasn't been a formal vote, but you've been given an opportunity to be able to identify what you might think as a commission you'd like to recommend to council for consideration as a priority. And amongst the variety of things that have come before this commission, certainly process improvements, permit streamlining, other economic development related activities, and then also general plan update. That is not currently a priority, but it's one that council had considered in the past, along with housing. And several of those items actually, have come before this commission in the past couple of years, specifically around some process improvements and permit streamlining and changing some of the roles of this commission, making it more advisory, and just as examples. With that, I'm going to stop, but I'm happy to answer any questions, and you get to structure your input and debate however you want as a commission.
Okay. I mean, anybody want to start? Anybody have any general comments about this?
I guess I have a question, is that are the things that were priorities previously, are those not to be considered as priorities moving forward? Or how much is it coming up with all new things or changing those things or that type of thing?
So you could make suggestions about the priorities, so that these are the category areas, and so that if in your opinion as a commissioner or not as a commission, that the city has a lot of work underway in a certain area, that you would recommend that something else be considered as a priority, as a substitution, that's one option. Another option is maybe, saying, so, you could recommend entirely new priorities, but most commissioners haven't done that. There's usually some sort of hybridized type of approach that, here, these things need to rise, further up in the consideration and resourcing. And then, there's work that's occurring already in these areas, so that some of the commissions have made recommendations in their feedback to council to consider one or two alternate priorities in lieu of, or, and then others have said, yeah, keep these 5 and add these also. So, it is up to your discretion.
Anything else? Any ideas?
I have a question. So these are general philosophic priorities, correct? Not specific to trends or things that we've been seeing lately coming here?
So you could take trends or things that you've been seeing here, and you could, so I'll only give you an example to help, your discussion perhaps for a bit, so that you may choose to say, we have been seeing this trend to do X, and because we've seen so many of X, we think that the city should consider as part of one of these priorities, or as an alternate priority, taking an action, a policy action to, just using the example of the sign right there, to update a sign ordinance that allows, these things to happen, automatically, without having to come to this body to consider. Or alternately, you have been seeing X coming through, and you've consistently denied it, and so would like to have some emphasis or, research done around that. So those are examples. Or there may be something as your, in your role in your public or your professional lives that you're seeing that you feel that the city would benefit from putting more emphasis on.
So we have we have a mandated housing requirement. Under which of these does that fall?
That is a very good question. It is not currently a priority. I know there's irony in that, but the thought had been at the last council priority setting that at that juncture, there was such a big push to get the housing element to be adopted and put in place, that there was, a sigh of relief. I think that we've since found that that was just the first step.
The one thing that I've noticed is there's kind of a what do I want to say, that the neighborhood outreach and information around the infill housing projects, I would like for us to work on philosophically on some better way of requiring the developers to do a little more to fit these new projects that we've been seeing and that have popped up in pretty much all of our neighborhoods into the neighborhood, as opposed to dropping in what they did before in multiple other locations, and it doesn't necessarily it doesn't fit in the neighborhood, and it doesn't speak to the neighborhood, and it's not necessarily communicating with the traffic and the pedestrian levels aren't necessarily communicating with the neighborhood as a community. And that's sort of a philosophical approach to this. What do you guys think of that? That's something that I noted. We shouldn't have to sit here and say, look, you've got this giant wall and you've walled out everybody. and that's not acceptable. That's some way that we can think of to,
It's got to be,
Outline.
it's got to be stitched into the fabric
Right.
of the city,
exactly,
right?
exactly.
Yeah. I think so. I was kind of glad you articulated that.
Yeah.
Anything else?
It's happening, it's going to happen, it's a good thing it's happening. People should be able to do these ADUs, they should be able to do these other things, but they shouldn't be exclusionary of the surroundings. They shouldn't be so different that they are an eyesore in a neighborhood.
Point of clarification, and I think you said it, I just can't hear that good. And you did say infill residential projects.
Yes, yes.
Any of them, really.
Well, and there is an overarching philosophy and requirement that things do go with, you know, the rest of the city. It's just, for some reason, it's not.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's part of the code, is that
Right.
it matches the neighborhood.
Right.
So, if I may.
Not necessarily.
So one of the challenges that every jurisdiction within the state of California has is that there had been new legislation, and as part of the current set of priorities and permit streamlining, the only criteria that any housing project can be evaluated against are objective design standards and those guidelines. And so there was a concerted effort to update those and have those adopted last year. And in fact, two of the members here, on this commission had worked very diligently to help update those standards and those in essentially to elevate the base requirements of those objective design standards.
Okay, true. I was one of those people. I think we need to think about what the secondary effects are of these housing projects. So if you go, and you can, build a house in your backyard or build podium housing of higher stories, what has to be done to the infrastructure on every level to accommodate that? So we're talking about roads. We're talking about transit. How do you need to kind of do an overlay of the planning exercise and going, okay, first we used to think this was possible. Now this other thing is possible. This other density is possible and probable. So what are the kind of impacts will that have on the city? I think that's probably how you say it, because it's really like we have no power over these state housing things, but they can exist, and you can go put a building on a property, even if it might be something we might not support. But with that as a reality, what else has to be done to make, Walnut Creek a vibrant city? And do there need to be more parks around this? What kind of planning overlay might have to be done?
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm going to, because
Okay.
the very concepts that you're talking about and the things that you're asking about would fall within the a framework of a general plan update, and our current general plan goes. It was adopted in 2006 and goes through 2025. So many of the things that you're talking about would fit within that, kind of box, bucket, whatever you want to call it.
Well, I think that in that case, that would be a reason to make it a priority, make the general plan update a priority. Right?
And I could add that one thing that didn't change was that the city's ability to charge impact fees. So impact fees are typically for the exact items that are fixes, improvements that you've mentioned.
But with those incoming funds, how do you decide to prioritize it? And that's where the general plan update comes in, right? So that's good that there's theoretically money to do it, but sometimes money if it's just sitting there, gets used for other things, so I think so. I think, I think for me, it's, my brother has been involved in the city and around a long time with the issue of homelessness. And, also talking about housing, right? So, housing for who? Right? So like, and I don't know how really to articulate it, but there's a lot of talk about low-income housing and offsets and so forth. It's, how does that get fulfilled? Yeah,
Because that last project that we saw, there was essentially a low-income multifamily project immediately adjacent to this, now 30-foot tall wall within 4 feet of their back fence, because that was a, essentially state-guided project that we couldn't say much about. So to your point, I think that goes in, that we need to talk about that in the context of the general plan. Because we can't penalize people who are already in affordable housing by allowing developers to just cookie cutter these things that went in that spot and work just fine in this more commercial location, but don't belong in a neighborhood where there's already people who need and deserve that housing.
yeah. I mean, you could talk about it in the context of a general plan update, but the first thing you said was diversity, equity, and inclusion,
Correct.
which is very important, right? But what we're about is physical things, right? So like how diversity, equity, and inclusion is, there have been many names for this over the years, but very little progress. And so saying it at the top of the list is meaningless unless you come up with a plan for how that's done. And I would argue that I think it's right, that belongs at the top, but every one of those other priorities needs to riff off that and say how you're doing it. And that comes down to housing. It comes into things like transit, how people ride bikes around town. Those type of things are very important to actually making a resilient and diverse community. So I think the diversity, equity, and inclusion thing is a great thing, but I think they need to drill down and say what that means, because I'm an architect, I do public works, and I always gets asked the question about how I'm gonna do it. And it's hard to do when you're doing like one thing, but really, if we're gonna go say that or actually tell other people that that's a deliverable, you need to tell them what you're looking for.
Well, so in my previous career as an urban infill developer, residential mixed-use developer, I did a project in the Mission called Mosaica. And it was called Mosaica because it was a mosaic, because it included homeless repositioning housing and affordable housing. And my piece of it was to develop the for-sale condo project that paid for the rest of it. And it also had repositioned neighborhood retail. So there's ways to think about it as an overall and incorporate those things. I'm not saying we have a lot of space to do it here in Walnut Creek at the moment, but what we were just talking about with that last project, with that obviously affordable section of single-story apartments immediately adjacent to this project, there's ways to be more sensitive to it somehow within the requirements that we have to allow it to.
Yeah, it's like these projects. I think that these housing projects we're doing are great. Frankly, I think it's important that we do it. But the way the legislation is it's like you have this building that just floats in from space.
Right, exactly.
Doesn't speak to anything around it.
Exactly.
And it doesn't have any of those wonderful things that you mentioned, right? Because you can't go through that process. So it behooves us as a community to actually say, okay, well, we're having this project and everything around it, we have to actually soften everything around it to accommodate some of those things, which I think goes back to the general plan update, but I feel like that would be a very important thing to say in a general plan update. I mean, I don't know.
I agree with all of that. I mean, particularly the housing and who the housing is for, and having DEI has to do with many things, right? And economics is a huge part of that as well. So really, if we are going to be diverse and inclusive, it is taking into account all levels of that economic.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to mention something else now, so if you, but I also, and I think in light of what is happening in LA and in light of just how it has been here, really going back again to environmental sustainability and climate action. And I think it's even more important. And I realize that I don't know, as a Walnut Creek resident, what the disaster plan is, right? What if Shell Ridge was on fire? What's the plan? What are we supposed to do? And I think that it is inevitable that these are going to become more and more common events, and that as a community, as part of that general plan, we need to really look at acknowledging it and figuring out that how our community understands and is communicated with, and how we sort of acknowledge that it's happening and communicate out to our citizens. Because as one, I don't know what would be happening.
I'd love to know, because Acalanes Ridge is right above my house.
Right, and we all live, and it's the wonderful thing about living here, but the flip side is,
I mean, if you look at those shots of Altadena and you look at those grids of streets,
Yeah,
there's no way any one of those people thought ever
ever that it
that their house there was
No.
a firestorm. They have wide streets and so forth. It's staggering. So I think it's a really good point.
Santa Rosa.
Yeah,
it's the same thing, and we are just the same as, right?
We're
like,
just the same as Santa Rosa or Altadena. Did you see that one street of about a mile of,
the Cedars.
Cedars? Wasn't that amazing?
Interesting how they survived. Yeah.
yeah,
And protected all the houses underneath them.
It's actually no accident, right? So, and there was another story of it I watched on 60 Minutes about
Sorry, we're digressing.
how one person came in, this fire marshal from another, and he came in and he saved 2 houses just by pouring liquids on the gas meters. Well, what are the things that you have to do as a community to actually harden the community against these threats?
right,
Yeah, I mean, that's,
So that hardening the community against the threats needs to go in that climate action update.
yeah.
exactly, and
Okay, or public safety, one of the two.
yeah, but,
Yeah.
and that's in the way where, there's ways in which they can't be separate, they are the same, right? The housing and it's all, they are related to each other, but, it's really important. Yeah, public safety and climate action are the same thing in many ways, right?
They're all linked. And by the way, I mean, if you go look at Altadena, I mean, that's a blow to diversity, equity, and inclusion.
No kidding.
Oh, yeah.
80% of the homeowners were
Yeah,
of color. It's amazing.
it's,
So sad.
so it's, I mean, that's the trick, is how, it's really, I was involved with a lot of projects after the Oakland fire all those years ago. And there were lots of code changes that were made then. It's hard to believe how long it's been. And houses built after that time are safe. So if you go look down at LA or really LA, you see that there's houses that they seem to have been immune, but the reality is that they're just done to the new codes. So, but in an existing community like this, you don't have the ability to tear down everything and restart it. You just have to provide the security in other ways. I mean, building codes are great, but, we live here all our lives, we might impact 10% of everything, and the rest of it is in trouble, maybe. Yeah. Well, I don't know. Anything else? I think those were really good points.
Thank you very much. We will be attempting to summarize this and then conveying this to council.
Not right now. Okay. Thank you. Well, that was a lot better than I thought, so thanks. Okay, so with that, going on to the next thing is, do we have any commissioner member or staff reports?
I have none, thank you.
Okay. All right, good. So then we're going to adjourn.
6:36.